Assalamu alaikum, hello and welcome. You're listening to Unity FM on 93.5 FM. My name is Shazia and you're joining me on the Nutrition Show. Really excited to have you all join me today for a discussion on health and well-being through nutrition. Before we dive in, I would like to remind listeners that all information shared on today's show is general in nature. For anyone with any medical issues or concerns related or unrelated to today's chat, please be sure to seek medical advice from your own general practitioner. So today is a blessed day as I have the honour of being joined by a very special lady, a registered nutritional therapist, previously trained as a diabetes specialist nurse. She supports her clients with managing their conditions and or symptoms, namely diabetes, pre-diabetes, thyroid imbalance and fatigue. She uses her extensive knowledge and experience to help people balance their hormones, including women in their various life stages, whether they be of childbearing age all the way through to menopause. Her aim is to provide education on balancing her clients' sugar, keeping them on track and achieving great results. She's a guide for people to a new way of living, and she achieves these through many ways, utilising recipes, programs, and an online community. In her own words, if you think that craving sugar and being constantly tired is part of life, think again. You can feel happy and healthy again. Hello and welcome, Alice Yeates.
Hi, Shazia. Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Hi, lovely.
I love that quote. I do remember saying it, but it feels like it's a while ago. But I very, very much believe that, everybody can have energy throughout the day. Amazing. We don't have to suffer with fatigue and sugar cravings. So. Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Amazing. And I love that quote too, so that's why it's in there. So yeah, it kind of sums everything up, doesn't it, really, for our kind of the reason for why we're on the show today. It's kind of giving people that that reassurance and that kind of motivation to say, look, you don't have to feel this way, it's not normal. We can do a lot more with ourselves and achieve much more with our bodies if we nourish them in the right way.
Absolutely. And I really feel like the point at which people come to me, they're at a junction, and they've already, by the time they speak to me, they've made a decision that they don't want to carry on the journey they're on at the moment, but they don't really know what the other journey has in store or what where it's taking them.
Absolutely.
And so, in fact, I've just come off a call with a diabetic, and I said to him, look, either you go down the road that your body is taking you at the moment with signs of lots of inflammation, and potentially you're looking at the things that I saw when I was nursing, which are, I don't bear repeating the things that happen to diabetics who don't look after themselves or who don't take notice, or you have this other option of going down a road of discovery. Wow. And of learning and of creating new habits. And none of that has to be onerous. It can be done it can be done slowly, carefully, and within your lifestyle. And that's really what I love, is I'm looking at somebody's life and going, well, if that doesn't work for you, then we'll find something else that does.
Amazing. I love that. It just makes it so much more it kind of knocks away the overwhelm, doesn't it? I think that's kind of key. You've got to get people into a frame of mind where they're not overwhelmed and not overthinking things. So it's just stopping them from taking action, isn't it? And I just love what you've said there, because it just makes so much sense, doesn't it? And we see this in our work as nutritional therapists, that we take that overwhelm away and break things down into manageable chunks that people can then start to kind of make part of their day-to-day life. And I can't wait to get into this. I remember hearing your story actually on an interview, which really quite honestly blew me away, and that's what actually made me get in touch with you, Alice. And I thought, I've got to speak to this lady because this is just too amazing. So I almost felt like an instant connection with you, because I thought, this she's got something special here, because she's teaching people about something which actually to us is very basic, isn't it? It's very simple if you break the science down, and it's just about making that understandable to the client. So I mean, I know your story, and I really love it. And I just thought, for the benefit of our listeners, Alice, would you mind sharing a little bit about your journey? So where you started, and how you've got to where you are today? Because it's such an awesome journey.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
The journey starts more than 40 years ago.
Wow.
When I went into nursing, and funnily enough, in my training, I was terrified of diabetes. I really didn't understand it. So when my final placement came up on the diabetic ward, I was wow. and I went in, and it's probably was the best nursing experience of my life.
Amazing.
The ward sister was the best teacher, and both consultants were amazing teachers. I was lucky enough to work with an Australian who was just so accepting. Nurses were just as important as doctors, and at that stage, we're talking in the 80s, it wasn't necessarily the case. And so I had a really amazing learning journey, and within that job I then started working as a diabetic specialist nurse. Now, for the diabetics listening, this was before the HbA1c came in. Wow. And it actually came in while I was practicing as a diabetic specialist nurse in the mid-80s. Okay. And I was talking to this guy this morning. It's really funny because people would try and pull the wool over our eyes. They would come in having been really good for 24 hours, but we could just look at them and know that their blood sugars were too high. There's a certain look. There's particularly the redness around the eyes and in the eyes. Okay. So blood vessels in the eyes, when it's really, really red, is a real sign that the blood sugar's been too high for too long. So come full circle, and 2011, I was diagnosed with what they call myxedemic crisis. And I'd been suffering for 2 years with doctors saying, your blood tests are fine, there's nothing wrong. And then suddenly my body literally just shut down. Wow. And very close to the edge. And I ended up in hospital. Thankfully, the consultant was listening and found out what the problem was. And I came from really the bottom of the deepest valley and brought myself back to what I consider to be pretty decent health now. And every time I got to a point where I thought, oh, actually, I could live like this. This is quite good. I found something else. Wow. And it's what took me down the nutrition journey. It was finding something else. It was finding nutrition. But that experience in 2009, 10, 11, when my body was really, really struggling, taught me something that I think I couldn't have learned any other way when it comes to supporting other people. Because for me to be able to say, I hear your pain, I understand what you're feeling, I know what fatigue feels like, we need to just take tiny, tiny little steps. Like, can you have a glass of water when you wake up in the morning? Could you walk to the end of your front path? Could you walk 2 steps up your staircase? Could you get out of your chair and just move for 2 minutes? Could you just pick up something and maybe do a little bit of exercise, even if you're still sitting in a chair? Because when I first started trying to recover, I would have to be driven to the park, which was 5 minutes away. Wow. 5 minutes walk normally. I was driven to the park, and I could literally walk to the first park bench, which was probably 20 yards. And over the course of the first 3 months, I managed to walk a little circuit within the park. And over the course of the next 6 months, I could probably walk round the park. And interestingly enough, I've had to do this 2 or 3 times in my life, because in my 20s, I had a really bad accident at work when I was nursing. Oh, wow. And I had to bring myself back from physical problems with a back injury. And so when I talk to people about doing things in little stages, about introducing just one thing that could make a change, it comes from a really heartfelt place. And I think, if people say, well, I can't do that, and I go, well, let's work out something you can do then.
Amazing. Wow.
Because actually we need to win in life. We need to win. And I feel like I've been on a winning journey for over 10 years now. Wow. Because everything I learn about seems to support me. And very often I'll be sitting with a client on Zoom, sometimes face to face, but mostly on Zoom these days, to be perfectly honest. And I'll feel like I'm looking in a mirror. I feel like that person is telling me my own story.
Wow.
My story of I couldn't get up out of bed. Or 2 days ago, I spoke to somebody who said, oh, well, this morning I managed to get up and have a shower and put makeup on. But yesterday I didn't move off the sofa. And I feel like I'm looking in the mirror at what was me 10 years ago. Wow. And I think that's a big part of why people resonate with working with me, because it just, I've had that craving sugar. I've had that moment when actually if I ate one piece of toast, I wanted the whole loaf. And sometimes I would eat the whole loaf.
Wow.
And it wasn't that I was putting on weight. It wasn't that in fact, at the time, I didn't have diabetes. But I do believe that if I'd carried on the journey I was on, I would have developed diabetes.
Of course, yes.
Because my body was in such a shocked state, such a energetically deprived state, that the hormones were going wrong. And it's something that I look at a lot with women around menopause and with men around in their 50s as well, because there's something in the men's hormones that changes then as well. And when hormones start changing, all hormones start changing. It's not just hormones that change.
Yeah.
And I really believe that hormones work a bit like a Swiss watch. All these cogs moving that have to slide into each other.
Yeah.
And when one shifts, so the sex hormones shift, they shift in puberty, they shift in pregnancy, they shift if we go on the pill or something, they shift around menopause and change of lifetime for men. And when they shift, all the others have to catch up. And as we age, they are less able to do that. So actually what I've realized is that supporting people with thyroid health and with diabetes, there isn't that much of a difference.
Wow.
Which is really interesting, because what we're looking at is stabilizing blood sugars and stabilizing hormones. And yes, there are little things that are different that we're tweaking, but we're also looking at gut health. So it's a really interesting trajectory that my story's taken me on, really, because I've come from a place of, fatigue isn't the right word, because I was motionless. I didn't move out of bed for a month, and it took me 3 months to walk to that first bench in the park. And then after that, I started incrementally building. But what I realized was that I wasn't responding to the medication that I'd been given.
Oh, wow. Incredible.
And I suppose I don't know whether it's a personality type or whether it was my age or whether it was my upbringing or what it was, but I was like, I'm 50, I'm just not ready to be old. And I felt old. And I think if I'd had one of those biological tests done for aging, I probably would have been about 75 at the time, even though I was only 50. And so I started looking into other things. I had a friend who was training to be a nutritional therapist at ION, actually, at the time.
Okay.
And she suggested I go and see this guy who they just had in to do a lecture.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, well, what have I got to lose? So I went to see him. And he was an old boy who'd practiced as a who had been an endocrinologist and was practicing as a nutritional therapist because he wanted to carry on practicing in the way that he had previously. And funnily enough, he suggested me going on a different support mechanism for my thyroid, which is actually what my grandfather would have prescribed in the 40s and 50s.
Oh, wow, amazing.
On the NHS. But sadly, it's no longer available on the NHS.
Oh, wow.
Because now we use levothyroxine.
Yes.
But what really fascinated me about him was he did a proper physical examination, which no one had done. Reflexes, balance, just things that no one else had done. And they were the sort of tests that doctors used to do.
Okay.
They kind of, I think they get done in hospitals still, but they're not done by GPs.
Okay.
And he picked up on things in my body that no one else had picked up on. And he was the one who said, look, we need to go right down to basics here and look at little steps to try and build you up. And it was after seeing him that another friend who'd been incredibly supportive during my ill health journey, and we'd been talking about nutrition together, and she said, I found this open day, do you want to come? And I said, and I looked at it and I went, I really want to come, but I can't actually come tonight. So she went to the open day and I went to the next one. And we both signed up for this nutrition course. And, you know, that was just really the beginning of the next stage of my journey. Because everything you learn about in nutrition, you start going, oh, I wonder if that applies to me.
Yeah.
And you must remember that.
Yeah.
Oh, I wonder if that applies to me. Yeah. Oh, I wonder if I could try that. And, you know, we're the world's worst at trying things out, I can tell you.
Absolutely. I totally agree. When I read things, I'm like, I've got that symptom. I've got that. That's happening to me. That's going to work for me. I do that all the time. I can't help it. I was like, I must have all of those symptoms. I must have all of those conditions. It's crazy, isn't it?
But so lecturers were incredibly supportive, and actually when you talk to the lecturers as you go through and they get to know you better, you start learning just by default as well as in lectures. I remember one of the lecturers saying to me, you really would benefit from doing meditation.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, really? It was something that was far too ethereal for me at the time. And actually now what I try to do with clients is to teach them something that they can do that gives them quiet time. Because I know I resisted meditation for about 5 years, literally 5 years. And even when I did start, it took me a long time to get into any sort of consistent practice. And so what I've tried to do with clients is to find ways that they can do something that helps them to reset their nervous system.
Wow, amazing.
And that's because, and this is something that a lot of people don't know, that's because that nervous system response, that stress response, it actually instructs the body to release sugar.
Which people don't really, they don't relate, do they? They don't relate the two together. I've spoken to other guests as well, and they've said exactly the same, how it's not, the stress element of life is not related to the symptoms that we're actually seeing. And actually, how important is it to understand that, and then be able to explain that to our clients, so that they realize, actually, you might be thinking, I'm not eating anything, but my diabetes is still not under control, for example. But they're so stressed out with work deadlines, with family things going on, and they just can't make that connection, can they? Because they don't realize, actually, cortisol is like working overtime, and it's releasing all this sugar into your body, which it is still happening, regardless of the fact that you're not eating.
And the other thing about it is that it actually disrupts the other hormones as well.
Yeah, this is it.
So it's disrupting estrogen and progesterone. It's disrupting testosterone. It's disrupting the adrenal system.
It's stealing, isn't it?
It's impacting the thyroid as well. So the whole thing is just a cascade. And then if you're producing sugar from storage because you're stressed, you then have to produce more insulin.
Absolutely.
And one of the big issues with type 2 is actually we want to reduce the amount of insulin that we're having to produce. And every time we produce sugar out of storage because we're stressed, we need more insulin to bring it down. Absolutely. Because if you think about it, the sugar that we produce when we're stressed is straight sugar. We might as well be putting teaspoons of sugar in our tea.
Wow.
And no diabetic that I know that works with me would put sugar in their tea. When you suggest that actually they're just dumping 2 teaspoons of sugar into their body, they go, what can I do to stop that happening?
Wow, amazing. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a really interesting.
And I love the way you've described the connection that you have between yourself and your clients, because when it's coming from that deeper place, I think the client can feel it. There's you can actually sense that person really is speaking from their heart, and it's not just what they've read in a book, or they've understood at a course, or got from their qualification. So I really love that connection. That that gave me goosebumps, that did, because I think it's it's so unique to an individual, that, and it's something that can't be bought. It's something that's so special, and so it's so successful because of that. I think that's so, it kind of gives you that edge, I think, when you have that, and having come from a journey where you've seen each one of those symptoms kind of manifest in your own life. And I think people connect to that, and they're able to understand better than someone who's just kind of like read it out of a book and said, oh, you try this and try that, and you're just throwing things at people, and you're expecting them to then kind of take that on board and make the change. And I think I
find it really interesting because what I say to people at the beginning of my initial consultation, so I don't do questionnaires.
Okay. Oh, wow.
And there's a really good reason for that, because I feel like when I do that first initial consultation, we're really beginning to join the dots. And what I've had from clients is they will suddenly start making connections, because I'm asking questions going from childhood history all the way through all the organs in the body. They will start making connections as to how their body's behaving and why it's behaving in a certain way, or why it's responded to something that they hadn't connected before. And if I don't do that in person or on Zoom, but if I don't do that face to face, I feel like I'm missing a lot. And very often, something will come up in that session that needs talking about. Because it's actually one of the reasons that somebody's gone down the diabetic route in the first place. And I say to people at the beginning of the initial consultation, I warn you, I have no idea where this session is going. I said, I know what I'm planning to cover, but I never know what direction this journey is going to take.
I love that.
and I love initial consultations for that reason, because they're never the same from one to the next.
Amazing. I love that.
So formulaic is not me. From the heart, as you just put it, is definitely me.
Amazing. I love that. That makes you unique, Alice. And I think you know, like you say, you've got to find that connection. And I think when you actually tap into that sort of inner being, so to speak, I think that's when you start to see the magic, don't you? That's when the results start to happen. That's so amazing. So I'm going to dive into more in regards to diabetes, because I think that's a really essential kind of piece of learning for our audience in particular. I just want to remind our listeners, before we do continue the discussion, that what we're talking about today is for information purposes only, and it doesn't constitute medical advice in any way. So if you're taking medication, you're concerned about anything, whether that's related to diabetes or otherwise, please don't be alarmed. Speak to your general practitioner, get advice from the medical teams that you work with, because the idea here is for you to learn about new things that may support you, and to go and look into these on your own initially, and then to speak to your medical team so that you can work in a holistic way. So remember, nutrition is part and parcel of all the other things that are going on in your life, so whether that's medication, your diagnosis, whatever it may be. So your safety and your health is our primary concern. So this is all just for educational purposes only. So Alice, you do a lot of work, as your background is in diabetes. So how would you, if you had to describe to someone what diabetes is in very general, specific terms, someone perhaps who hasn't come across what diabetes is? I mean that's going to be probably a rare thing now, isn't it? Because everyone knows someone, if they're not diabetic themselves or pre-diabetic, with symptoms or with a diagnosis of diabetes. So I think it's important for people just to kind of know what diabetes is, and then maybe just a little bit about the kinds of symptoms we may see and what you see in clinic, and then we can dive into more about how you manage them a bit later. Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah, so diabetes essentially is the body's inability to move sugar from the blood into the cells.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens, we end up with sugar in the blood instead of being used for energy in the cells. So the mechanism by which we move sugar from the blood into the cells is activated by insulin. And most people now have heard of insulin, but they don't really understand what's going on. So in simplistic terms, I want you to imagine a cell with two gates, receptor gates. One's for insulin and one's for glucose. Now those gates have to open in turn. The insulin one first, which then switches a switch in the cell to open the glucose gate. Now this is very basic. This isn't exactly what happens, but it's a good description to help people understand what's going on.
Great.
So the glucose gate then opens and brings the sugar into the cell from the bloodstream. And then we can use it instead of it hanging around in the body where it shouldn't be. Now, the development of diabetes is partly that the pancreas isn't producing enough insulin for that mechanism to work properly. And it is also because those gates aren't working properly. So if the insulin gate doesn't open as well as it should, it doesn't let enough sugar in through the glucose gate. So we get some left in the blood. Now, when we get sugar left in the blood, that's when we start getting diabetes symptoms.
Okay.
Before I go into that, which I will in a second, I just want to say that the body compensates for a very long time. So in order to see early, particularly in your community, it's very important to see early whether you're going down the diabetes route or not. Now, I'm going to tell a little story here.
Okay.
So I've had a really lovely lady work with me in my membership community. So that's a pretty low cost way of working with me if you're worried about diabetes or you've been told you've got pre-diabetes. And so she came on board when the community started, which is just over 2 years ago.
Wow.
And she has both parents and a sister with type 2 diabetes. And she didn't want to go there. She was 49 at the time. She knew she was carrying a little bit of weight, but not really very much. But she had this feeling that the chances were that she was going down that road. Cut a long story short, at her last blood test, the doctor didn't believe the results. They had to go and check them again.
Oh, wow.
Because her risk of diabetes had gone from really, really high to 0.6%.
Amazing.
And the doctor said, I've got a person sitting in the next room with all the same family history as you, and their risk of diabetes is 60%.
Wow.
And yours is 0.6.
Oh, my goodness. That's incredible.
And she had changed little habits gradually. She was very disciplined, but she'd changed little habits gradually. So when she first came to me, her HbA1c was 37. Now, just for the benefit of the listeners, the HbA1c, when it gets above 40, is going into the diabetic range. In 2023, we call that pre-diabetes. In the 80s, when I was doing diabetes work, pre-diabetes didn't exist. You were either diabetic or you weren't. So anything above 40, you want to start do something about it. Okay. This woman started with me when she was at 37. And by the time she had that doctor's appointment earlier this year, so that's over the course of 2 years, by the time she had that doctor's appointment earlier this year, her blood sugar was 30.
Wow. Amazing.
She's, it's lower than your average man on the street. And she is absolutely delighted. And the weight loss is half a stone.
Incredible, isn't it? Wow.
But she's completely shifted her trajectory. You know, I talked about that junction where we go down the healthy one or we go down the unhealthy route. She's gone down the healthy route and she's absolutely delighted. She's flying. She looks amazing.
Amazing.
And she's from South Asia originally. Both her parents are Asian, her sister as well.
Wow.
And they've got proper, serious diabetes with neuropathy, etc.
Oh, goodness.
She's done very well.
Absolutely.
I was going somewhere else from there and I've forgotten where I was going. Anyway, so yeah, what I was going to say, I've had a gentleman recently, different person altogether, very fit, very active, 79-year-old man.
Wow.
Again, with some family history of diabetes. And he found out in October that his HbA1c was 52. Now, that's relatively high to be first finding out. So when I suggested in February that he get some other blood tests and check what his blood sugars had been, he'd actually been pre-diabetic for at least 5 years. And he didn't know. So it's something I would say to people, check the numbers.
Okay, so
don't take it for granted that the doctors are telling you, because everybody's different. Everybody talks differently about diabetes. Get numbers. And I would say if you're getting above 35, 36,
sure,
it's worth thinking about it. If you're getting above 40, you need to take notice.
Absolutely. Prevention's better than cure, isn't it? So
absolutely. And reversing type 2 when you're at that level, when you're barely diabetic,
sure, is
what this woman did.
Absolutely.
And it's much easier.
Yeah.
Once you get up into the 50s, it becomes more difficult.
Much harder.
You can do it, but it's harder.
It's much harder.
Because the mechanisms I was talking about within the cell wall have got tired and they're working less and less. So if you can catch it when those mechanisms are just a bit fatigued and need supporting,
sure, then
you can bring it back. So long answer to your question.
It's okay.
Going back to the symptoms. So that's telling you that clients present to me at all stages. And I've got a gentleman who's had diabetes for 15 years, and I've been working with him for 2.5 years. And he comes to me once a month because he knows that if he comes to me once a month, he will be doing what he's supposed to be doing to keep his blood sugar at a good level.
So that's like his checkpoints, isn't it?
Exactly.
Checking in and making sure he's on the right track.
It just checks him in and goes, oi.
Are you behaving?
That's literally it. That's literally it.
Yeah.
And you know, we do talk about it.
Yeah.
But really, it's a check-in point. And
Absolutely.
we look at his numbers. He takes his blood sugars. We look at his numbers. We look at he's taking some supplements. We look at the medications he's taking.
Sure.
And we look at what he's doing, and we look at his food. And then he goes away for another month. But it just keeps him
on
in
track.
range rather than, you know, his blood sugars have been 40 to 45.
Wow.
Pretty much all the time. And when they get up above that, it's a rein in and let's talk a bit more frequently.
Amazing.
But he's, you know, that's pretty good. Symptoms wise, that red eye thing is quite an interesting one. Not one that's picked up on very often. If people start saying to you that your eyes are very red, and I do mean around the outside, but I particularly mean in the whites of the eyes.
The whites, yes.
Now, it's not a researched, proven symptom, but pretty much any diabetic I've ever met has had red eyes.
That's amazing.
So it's really worth looking at. Any sort of tingling or sensations in the feet and hands need to be investigated.
Okay.
Your wee smelling different, being particularly thirsty.
Okay.
Some people present with headaches. Those are the kind of classic symptoms. Now, the ones that start well before your blood sugar goes out of range are the tiredness after meals. Or the craving sugar. Particularly I find when I'm talking to clients, the time they crave sugar is in the evening after dinner. So some people desperate for coffee. That's another one. They just need the energy to keep them going. And the interesting thing about that is that coffee produces that cortisol response that we were talking about earlier and brings sugar out of storage.
It does, doesn't
it? So we've got this yo-yo going on with the insulin again.
I think a lot of people are going to relate to this, and I think what we'll do is we'll talk more about the kind of the symptoms that people could experience, and then maybe some of the measures that perhaps you take in terms of working with people to bring their diabetes sort of into a more, or their risk of diabetes developing into range or into sort of optimal working sort of, you know, an optimal working area. What we'll do, we'll look into that. And I love the case that you mentioned, because a lot of people who will be listening to us are going to be of that South Asian sort of background. So I think people are going to say, oh, you know, that she's probably me. And I think if we can talk about that lady in particular and bring her out and sort of say, this is what she did, maybe we could do that after the break. Is that okay, Alice? So what we'll do then is just to let people absorb all that amazing information, because I could talk to you all day, Alice. This is just so incredibly amazing and useful. And I'm sure people are thinking, you know, they're relating to all of these things that you're mentioning, because I don't know how many people are going to listen to this and say, this is for me. And I'll bet they'll be calling in and saying, can I listen to the repeat on this? Because it's just so incredibly useful. And I suggest that people do listen to this once and listen to it on repeat and get all the information, and please take this away. So, I mean, this is, like I said, it's been so useful, even for me as a practitioner, to learn and actually appreciate that there's so much more than just throwing information at people, and it's about that connection. So we're going to go for a short break now. So you're listening to me, Shazia, on The Nutrition Show on Unity FM 93.5 FM with our special guest, Alice Yeates. We'll be back after the break for more, so please stay tuned. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to The Nutrition Show. You're joining me, Shazia, on Unity FM 93.5 FM with our special guest, Alice Yeates. We'll be diving into more about diabetes and how you can sort of support your body if you're at those early stages in particular, but also what you can do if you're a diagnosed diabetic as well. Obviously, this information is for health education purposes only. It doesn't constitute medical advice in any way. If you are worried or concerned about anything, please do seek a medical advice from your own medical practitioner. So what we want to make sure is that you're taking away the benefits of the information that we discuss, whilst making sure that the information is relevant to you individually and that your safety is paramount at all times. So welcome back, Alice. That first part of the show was so amazing. I think we could talk forever, as I mentioned, and I'm really looking forward to diving into more about that particular case that you mentioned of the South Asian lady with the family history of diabetes, because that's what we're seeing, aren't we, particularly in the South Asian community. And the cases are rising. You know, we're seeing the numbers increase day by day. I'd love to know more about how that lady, perhaps on a general level, was supported by yourself, what kinds of things she actually did, what measures she sort of put into place to help sort of change her numbers for the positive. And obviously she would have been liaising with her medical practitioner at the same time. So maybe some general advice in there as well about what people can try and look at to do, because I think there's that can be quite difficult sometimes, can't it? We see a lot of conflicting information out there as well now, so I think people can get quite confused. So how would that stand for you? How would you kind of talk about that?
So I think my first comment on that is this is about you as a person. It's happening to your body. It's not the doctor's body, it's not the diabetic nurse's body, it's your body. And if you want to look after your body, I'm hesitating to use the word take responsibility because it's a bit overwhelming.
It is, yeah.
So I just want you to start thinking about it for yourself. And most people know that diabetes is caused by sugar. Overload of sugar.
Yeah.
Now, as we've discussed in the first part of the show, sugar isn't only the sugar we eat, it's also the sugar we produce in our body. So first of all, there's that bit of it. So you will get diabetics who are not overweight. The people who will look at themselves and go, well, I'm not going to be diabetic, I'm not overweight, I'm not X, I'm not Y, whatever. And that's not necessarily the case.
Okay.
So actually looking at numbers is a really significant thing to do. And if you've got history of diabetes in your family, I would highly recommend you look at your own numbers. So you get a printout or a patient portal number on your HbA1c.
Okay.
You can get an HbA1c from your doctor. If you've got a family history, you can go in and say, I've got a family history, I want this checked.
Okay. Oh, incredible. That's great to know.
So I would really, really suggest you do that and get the numbers.
Sure.
And as I said before, if you're getting up into the high 30s, then start thinking about it. If you've got into the low 40s,
sure,
it's time to take some action. So what is that action? I have kind of 6 categories that I go by, and I've got an ebook which has those 6 categories in.
Sure.
And first of all, I'm going to go into the first 3 because they're
amazing.
the most significant ones. Okay. The first one, simplicity itself, is water. Diabetes is a disease of dehydration.
Oh, wow.
People don't think about it like that,
No.
but I promise you it is.
Wow.
If you imagine making a syrup for cooking, you're adding sugar to water. The water gets thicker. Think about blood with sugar in it. The blood gets thicker. Then think about all the consequences of thicker blood in the body. I don't need to go into details with that.
No.
But that's where the damage from diabetes comes from. Yes, it's sugar, but it's also the fact that it's sticky. It's not running freely.
Sure.
So drinking gallons of water is a really good start. If you take your body weight in kilograms,
sure,
and you multiply it by 30, that gives you the mils of water that you need to start with.
Amazing.
If you're already going down the diabetes route, or you're overweight, or you take a lot of exercise, you need to drink more than that number.
So it's individualized, isn't
let's
it?
just say someone weighed 80 kilograms. If you multiply 80 by 30, you get 2400.
Sure.
That's 2,400 mils of water. That's 2.4 litres.
Sure.
For someone like you or I, we could be looking at, let's say, 65 kilograms. We multiply 65 by 30 and we get 1950.
About 2 litres.
Okay?
Yeah.
About 2 litres of water.
Sure.
But that is your minimum requirement.
I see. And it's important.
And so, yes, go on.
I was going to say it's important that they divide this water up in the day and not take the whole thing in one.
So that's my next suggestion with anybody is the ideas about how to drink more water, because it's not necessarily straightforward, particularly if you're not somebody that drinks water normally. You have a glass of water when you wake up in the morning. If you want lemon in it, that's great because it supports your kidneys. But if you can't stand that, don't worry too much.
Great.
So 1 in the morning when you first wake up. And then we're talking a glass before each meal.
Okay.
So a glass before breakfast, a glass before lunch, and a glass before dinner.
Sure.
That's 3 more. And then we've got to think about, what else do we do regularly during the day? Well, most people will be making a cup of tea or coffee at some point. So actually having a glass by the kettle is a great way to encourage you to drink more water, because when you go to make a cup of tea or coffee, it's usually because you're thirsty.
Yes.
So put a glass by the kettle. When you're putting the water in the kettle, put water in the glass as well and drink the glass of water.
Okay.
And interestingly enough, it's those people who drink loads and loads of tea and coffee that suddenly realise that actually they're going for tea and coffee regularly because they're thirsty, not because they need the kick.
Okay.
The kick is they need the kick because they're dehydrated rather than because they're tired.
Okay.
So that's the next. I had one lady who came to me. She was 80 when she came to me.
Oh, wow.
And she couldn't do the glass by the kettle because she couldn't remember how many glasses she'd had. So she lined up her glasses.
Oh, wow.
Now, she wasn't diabetic, so I'm just going to put a proviso on this one.
Yeah.
But what she did was she would normally have a glass of wine with her lunch. So she'd line up her tumblers of water, and then her wine glass would sit on the end.
Okay.
And she wasn't allowed the wine until she drank all the water.
That's one way to do it, isn't it?
But she made that work for her.
Amazing.
Then, of course, you've got carrying water with you whenever you're out.
Okay.
Even if it's a little bottle, preferably not in plastic if you can help it.
Sure.
But,
a glass bottle is great, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Or I've got a thermos one. Yeah. One of the things I found, and this is a little bit weird and idiosyncrasy, is that when I'm sitting at my desk, if I have a water bottle with a glass and I put water into the glass, I drink more than if I just have the water bottle. The water bottle can disappear into the background and I forget about it. But if I've got a glass sitting there, I'll pour water into it and drink the whole glass.
That's really interesting.
So I drink more water if I have a glass there. So that's just a little aside. So water is probably your prime.
Amazing.
And I like to talk about add-ons because I think it's really important to add things in rather than take them away.
Definitely.
As I think when we add things in, the things that don't serve us actually start to fall away naturally.
It's easier, isn't it? Rather than making people feel deprived.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Amazing.
So the next one is protein.
Okay.
And I encourage people to eat protein at every meal. Okay. So this South Asian lady we're talking about wasn't eating protein for breakfast.
Okay.
And her go-to for breakfast was always chia.
Oh, wow.
And chia is the protein that the Aztecs went to war on. Did you know that?
No, I didn't. Amazing.
I would always, if you're having chia seeds, I would always recommend you soak them.
Okay.
Put them in a jam jar, fill them up with any milk of your choice, turn them over till they fill the jar.
Okay.
And then you can drink them or you can leave them in the fridge. Anyway, she would make her chia pots and then she would put them in a bowl and add other things,
flavors and things to make them exciting. It's got to make it exciting
berries,
as well.
This is part of the diabetes. Berries are your friend.
Okay.
Most diabetics don't spike their blood sugars when they have particularly raspberries and blueberries.
Oh wow. Okay.
Some spike with strawberries, some don't.
Oh, that's interesting.
And then your next best fruit is apples and pears.
Okay.
When you go towards the tropical fruits like bananas, pineapples, mangoes, you're talking high blood sugars.
I see. Does it matter if they're ripe or does that not matter? So,
riper is sweeter. But to be perfectly honest, bananas are not your friend.
Really? Oh wow.
There's an amazing guy, and I would encourage anybody with diabetes to look this man up.
Sure.
His name is Dr. David Unwin.
Okay, I've heard of him. Amazing guy, yes.
He's a doctor up north of you, Stockport, and he looks at the quantity of sugar in food.
Okay.
He's turned around a lot of diabetics with low carb diets, and they've reduced the costs to their surgery by masses. Sadly, they don't get the recompense for that. It all goes back to the NHS, but hey ho. But so he hates bananas with a passion.
Wow.
He did an experiment with a glucose monitor and ate a small ripe banana, and his blood sugar went from 5 to 10 in the space of 10 minutes.
Oh wow, that's incredible.
And then dropped down to about 3. He's not diabetic. So if you think about, that's a normal mechanism with a banana. What that does if your mechanisms are not normal.
Wow, yeah, absolutely.
Bananas, if you're desperate to have bananas, make sure you have some protein with them and have a little bit of a banana. Just have half a banana.
Sure.
Just try and reduce the amount of bananas you're eating. Try and stick with berries and apples and pears.
Excellent.
They are much more friendly.
Amazing.
And always going back to the protein, always have protein with them.
Sure.
So lovely way to find out about protein. Actually, just Google protein content of food, because it's a very easy way to work out if you don't know what protein is or if you don't know how much protein foods contain.
Sure.
That's worth looking at that. So my guidance on protein, and this is a very kind of ballpark guidance, it works for most people, is 1 gram a day per kilogram of ideal body weight.
Oh,
now, that's not actual body weight.
Oh, that's interesting, yeah.
So what I'd normally do is look at the kind of top end of the BMI scale. And you can do that by go to a BMI calculator on Google, put your weight in, put your height in, and it'll give you a scale. And on that scale, there will be an ideal colour band.
Okay.
So take the weight at the top of that ideal colour band and have that many grams of protein in a day.
That's really
so
useful.
If it's 85, you have 85 grams of protein in a day. And I like to keep it simple like that because, I'm not one for measuring. But I do like people to have an idea of the sort of quantity they need to be eating.
Something that they can use practically, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and so many people are not eating enough protein, particularly vegetarians and vegans.
Sure.
When we're looking at, first of all, the South Asian community, but also the younger generations, there are more and more people who are vegetarian and vegan.
Mm.
We really, really have to watch protein intake.
Sure.
I work at a retreat one Sunday a month, and one of the things that comes up pretty much every month, there's someone or more than one that I need to talk to about protein intake.
Wow.
Because particularly with vegans and vegetarians, getting enough protein is something you need to focus on.
Amazing.
Okay, so 1 gram per kilogram of ideal body weight.
Sure.
And that's split throughout the day. It must be at breakfast, because I'm just going to describe a mechanism of what happens at breakfast if you eat just toast or a banana or cereal.
We're guilty of that for sure.
Well, I'm not anymore, but I know that it's a very UK-wide problem.
It is.
And I would wholeheartedly recommend you either come away from it or you add protein into it. So look at that list of protein content, find out what you might eat. So you've got eggs, you've got fish, you've got meat, you've got nuts and seeds, you've got legumes and beans, that kind of thing. And there are others. Have a look at the lists, and adding those things into your breakfast. So if you're a toast eater, put peanut butter on it. No, it's not the healthiest thing in the world, but at least it's slowing down.
Yeah.
And make sure you have peanut butter with no sugar. At least the protein in the peanut butter will slow down the release of the sugar in the toast.
Because people don't relate bread to sugar, do they? They don't think bread is a sugar, but actually what does bread break down into? Glucose, doesn't it?
Exactly. And that goes for bread, potatoes, pasta, rice. Those are the main antagonists, let's say.
Absolutely.
And an interesting conversation with the guy I was talking about this morning, who said that he'd been to see a specialist endocrinologist about his diabetes.
Okay.
And the guy said, well, it's because he went to see him about intolerances.
Sure.
And the guy said, well, basically you're intolerant to carbohydrates.
Oh, wow.
And it's true.
Amazing.
It's true. And when it comes to carbohydrates, we're looking at bread, potatoes, pasta, rice as the main problems. Okay. So I'm going to go on from the protein to look at balance. Now, balance isn't one of the 6 I'm talking about, but balance, because it goes into carbohydrates, which is one of the 6. So those people that are knocking around the high 30s, early 40s can look at splitting their plate into 3. Okay. And thinking vegetables, protein, carbohydrates. I know there are other aspects to the plate, but I want you to just keep it simple.
Simple, yeah.
Simple. Split your plate into 3, like the peace sign, and look at carbs, protein, and vegetables. Now, if you want to increase your vegetables, you decrease your carbs. You don't decrease your protein. And so that's fine for some people. Some people find that really easy to relate to. Other people relate better to saying, stick to 1 fist or 1 handful of carbohydrate in a meal. And this, remember, I'm talking about people whose blood sugars are high 30s, early 40s here, and not talking about people whose blood sugars are higher than that. So what this lady did was to really think about what carbs were going into her meal. So she would have pulses, beans and lentils, because there are some carbs in there, but there's also some protein. She would have quinoa, which also goes, again, it has protein and carbs in it. And what she did actually was she would eat she would have her slice of bread at the weekend. Okay. She would have her glass of wine on a Saturday night. And she actually she was amazing, because she said there were occasions when she had a treat and she had something when she was out, but she would quite often go for avocado on toast or something like that, rather than having a piece of cake.
Amazing.
And she said it wasn't difficult once you started changing the thought process.
Yes.
Because she had food in front of her, she didn't feel she was depriving herself of cake.
Amazing.
And I suppose that's what I'm saying about add-ons, is, you know, have something there. Don't sit watching other people eat cake.
Yeah. That's the worst thing you can do.
Order some scrambled eggs on toast.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
Because if you can do that, you're serving your body in both ways.
Absolutely.
So either splitting your plate into 3 or going by the fistful.
Sure.
When I talk to people about going out, what we talk about is the biggest meal issue are things like burgers and chips. Okay. If you think of that balanced plate,
yep,
it's not very balanced. There's a burger and usually a salad, and then you've got chips and a bun. So my first point of reference is either chips or bun, not both.
Both, yeah. And
don't expect your willpower to work. Order it without a bun or without chips. When we're getting into the higher levels, what I would be suggesting to people is to actually, not go for the burger and chips option anyway, but to look at what they can be ordering on the menu instead of potatoes or chips or rice. Because on the whole, when you're in a restaurant, and I've learned this myself, if you ask for something instead of, you don't get charged.
That works well, then, doesn't it?
You ask for a side dish.
Exactly, a side, yeah.
You ask for a side dish, you'll pay for it. But if you say, can I have extra vegetables instead of potatoes, it'll go on the plate without you being charged extra. So it's worth thinking about that.
Good
tip. When it comes to carbs, new potatoes are digested more slowly than old white potatoes.
Okay. Interesting.
So in the summer season, when new potatoes are in, having a fistful, again, we're going for the fist, a fist portion of new potatoes with your protein and your vegetables is a great way to go. Okay. Now, I'm actually going to go with carbs. I'm actually going to go with another story. Actually, another Asian lady who came to me a long time ago when I was very first starting. She was a midwife, and we sat down. We were in a cafe situation, and we sat down and we were talking about what she'd eaten the day before. And this was a workshop, so I had other people around me, and actually she was a perfect person to do a demonstration with. Okay. And suitably, the cafe had sugar lumps, and I got a couple of extra cups and saucers, beautiful cups and saucers, and 2 pots of sugar lumps. And I said to her, okay, so tell me what you have for breakfast. And she had 2 slices of toast. So I wrote, and I was being conservative here. I said, that's at least 5 lumps of sugar per piece of toast, and probably more. So I put those sugar lumps into the cup. Sure. And what did she have? What did she have for lunch? Actually, she had rice and peas. Maybe she wasn't Asian. Maybe she was African. She had rice and peas for lunch. Okay, so peas are slightly protein, but mostly carb, and rice is all carb. So I put in another 10.
Oh, wow.
Conservative again, because that's a relatively small portion. Another 10 sugar lumps. So the cup's beginning to overflow, so I had to start using a second cup. What did you have for supper? A baked potato.
Oh, my goodness.
So, again, and I asked her what size, and I went, okay, well, that's 20 sugar lumps. Wow. So here we've got 2 cups full of sugar lumps.
Amazing. Nutritionist nightmare.
Do you put sugar in your tea? Oh no, I never put sugar in my tea.
Thank goodness for that.
But this is the amount of sugar you've just put in your
Wow,
body yesterday.
amazing.
So
She must have been shocked. What was her reaction, Alice?
She was really shocked.
Really?
She was really shocked. And this is a trained nurse. You know, she's a midwife.
People really don't know, do they? They really don't know, actually. They don't know.
Well, to be honest, we weren't taught anything about nutrition, really.
This is it.
When I trained as a nurse, I don't know what the training includes now. I know the medical training includes a very small amount of nutrition training.
I think they have about 5 to 6 weeks, I've heard. And a pharmacist didn't have any when I trained, so I don't know how the pharmacists.
It was 5 to 6 hours 5 years ago, and now it's 5 to 6 weeks.
Okay.
But whether it's one lecture every week for 5 to 6 weeks or whether, I don't know. But they do have some. But, you know, I did 4 years. I don't know about you. Yeah. So this is what you're looking at. So you're looking at how much carbohydrate you're putting on your plate at each meal. You're looking at how much water you're drinking. And you're most definitely looking at eating that required amount of protein every day, split through 3 or even 4 meals.
Okay.
If you're the sort of person that likes to eat something at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, then I wholeheartedly recommend you think of that as a 4th meal.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be big. But I would really recommend that you think of it as a 4th meal. If you think of it as tea, it immediately goes down the sugar route. And also, that time of day is the time of day we were picked up from school, if we were lucky. Many of us got into the habit of having sweet treats when we finished school.
I did.
and I've realised over time that's a habit that's really hard to break. So what I suggest to people is they don't try to break it. They actually go in and put something else in instead. So they do eat, but they eat something like an apple and peanut butter or carrots and hummus or a handful of nuts and an apple.
So a protein source alongside.
Or toast and peanut butter. Something that's got... Yeah, if you can do the balanced plate, but smaller, then perfect.
Okay, amazing.
God, there's so much to talk about. It's, you know, as you can tell, I could go on forever.
Amazing stuff.
The other 3 categories are alcohol, fats, and movement.
Okay.
So I'm not going to go into detail of any of them, but if anybody wants to have a look at the ebook, which goes into detail of all 6, go in there and have a look. You can download the ebook from there, and if you have any problems, just get in touch with me.
We can always put viewers in touch with you. That's fine. Yeah, no problem at all.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
thank you.
Amazing. If you had to summarize those last 3 points, what would you say?
Fats is get rid of the spreads. Because they're all hydrogenated. You might as well be spreading them on your arteries. Get rid of the spreads because they help those cell walls to be more rigid so the gates don't open. There's more to fats. Eat fish, eat oily fish, and look at omega-3 supplements if you're not eating fish.
Okay.
And the 3rd one was movement. I think I mentioned this at the beginning. If you're not somebody that moves, just get out the door if you possibly can.
Sit in your back garden.
To your house.
Yeah.
Move your arms.
Okay.
If you can stand up and sit down, stand up and sit down. There's a lovely story of a consultant who I work with, who told this story in one of his lectures. He had a guy come in who'd been diagnosed with diabetes, and he was quite overweight, wasn't doing any exercise, and he worked in a building with a staircase. And the doctor said to him, "I want you to climb 1 step." And the guy went, really? Just one? Yeah, one step. Said, I want you to come back in 3 weeks and give me your progress. And the guy came back 3 weeks later and he said, I can do the whole staircase.
Wow, amazing.
If that doctor had said, I want you to climb that staircase every day, I'm leave the rest to your imagination. So all I'm saying is something. Start by doing something.
Sure. Break that overwhelm.
Something builds. When you win with one thing, you start doing another. And if you don't do another, stick with the one until you feel like doing another. It's that simple.
It's like building.
And that's my principle with just about everything.
It's like building a house, isn't it? You don't build a whole house in one day. You start laying the foundation, then brick by brick. Yeah, it's a slow process. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, I like that analogy. Yeah. I've always used the staircase analogy. You can't go from the bottom to the top without climbing every step.
Exactly.
You might be able to jump one, but you can't climb it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And if I like the house building, I'll use that.
That's it. Why not? If it works, that's what we want to try and do, isn't it? Wow, I'm just so amazed. I mean, I could like yourself, Alice, I could just sit and talk about this and understand and learn about this all day. It's just so amazing, isn't it? It really gives you that energy yourself to kind of want to help others, and because it's coming from such a special place, when with your story, I can feel it. It just resonates so much better, and it helps people understand that actually this lady's got something really special to share. And even though everyone is individual, everyone's got their own learning journey, everyone's got their own progress. We don't compare ourselves to anyone else. I think that's really key. Don't look at the person next door and say, I've got to be like them and I've got to reach their numbers. No, it's your body. It's going to change in its own time. And taking that accountability, I think that's really key. And until you recognize that, hang on, I need to service my body the way I service my house, the way I service my car. We're far more important than those things. So we got to recognize that and give our body and that being that we are the time it needs to nourish itself. So, it is taking responsibility, and you don't have to do it on your own. I mean, we've got practitioners like yourself who are qualified, who are accredited, that people can approach. You've got your medical teams, and it's about spending that time investing in yourself, and making it count. And I think that's what's come away from this, is that it's not as hard as it's made out to be, and it's when you get the support on an individual basis that you can start making those changes even faster. And we're setting people up for long term. It's like once you're ready to fly the nest, you can go. And like you said with that man who's doing the check-ins, he was only coming back to you for a month at a time. So they appreciate that actually that does help. And that, you just want someone just to check in with you every so often. And it's quite nice that people can choose
that. It just feels like someone's got your back, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or someone's there to hold your hand.
Yeah.
And that's how I see myself.
Yeah.
I'm helping people through a journey.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really love that. And I think there's so much people can take away from today, just to look into it. I mean, obviously work with it. Don't start changing things until you've spoken to your medical practitioner. We're here to help and support you, but you have to realize that you've got to work with the teams that are available to you. And, we don't want you making sort of rash changes and getting yourselves into trouble in any way. So it's all there for educational purposes. So everyone, Alice, it's been amazing speaking to you today. I really appreciate the time that you've taken, out of your busy schedule to come and speak to us and share your pearls of wisdom, which I'm sure are going to serve so many people out there. For everyone listening, I hope that what you've heard today has been insightful, that gets you looking into what could work for your health while seeking support, as I say, from your medical teams. I would love to hear your thoughts, and all feedback is always appreciated. If you want to hear more about Alice's work, please get in touch with the station and we'll provide you with her details. We're here to support. The idea is that the guests come onto the show to give you their pearls of wisdom so that you can connect and you can, take the benefit of the resources that are available to you, that you can educate yourself, educate those that you influence. There's so much to know. There's so much that we can do for ourselves. And remember, we're investing in our own health, in our family's health. We've got to change the trajectory of health. I mean, look at the South Asian population alone. Diabetes, cardiovascular disease, obesity. They're not small things. We need to start changing the way that we we look after ourselves and our communities and far beyond, so that we can change the way things are, appearing in the press, in what we read and what we see in our day-to-day lives. So you're joining me, Shazia, on the Nutrition Show on Unity FM, 93.5 FM. I'm so grateful for another opportunity to connect with you. Take care until next time. Wassalamu alaikum.